Clara had always avoided the rain, but that evening found her running through the streets with no umbrella, the sudden downpour soaking her coat and plastering her hair to her cheeks, and when she finally ducked into the small cafe tucked between a bookstore and a florist, she was breathing hard, shaking off droplets and feeling the chill creep into her bones, and she thought she would be alone, but the cafe had one other visitor, a man sitting near the window with a notebook, absorbed in his writing, his pen moving in steady lines across the page, and when their eyes met for a brief moment, he gave a polite, small smile, the kind that felt warm and gentle, and Clara felt an odd flutter in her chest, unsure why a stranger's gaze could make her heart skip, yet she slid into a corner chair, brushing her wet hair from her face and trying to focus on the steam rising from her cup of coffee, feeling the warmth seep into her fingers, the rain still drumming softly against the window, rhythm that seemed to mirror her pulse, and she watched him scribble, noticing the intensity in his eyes, the way his brow furrowed slightly as he concentrated, the world outside the window blurring into streaks of neon light and wet asphalt, and as she sipped her coffee, hoping the heat would chase away the shiver she felt, he looked up again and his voice, calm and soothing, broke through the soft noise of the rain. "Take it easy," he said, and the words struck her in a way she could not explain, carrying a simplicity and kindness that pressed gently against her chest, and she realized she hadn't heard anyone speak like that in a long time. Not with the ease, not with the softness, not with the sense that someone understood that life could be overwhelming, and she nodded, unsure what to say, her lips parting as if to respond, yet no words came, and in that brief silence something unspoken passed between them, a connection delicate and fragile, yet undeniable, like a spark in the quiet storm around them, and Clara's mind began to wander, thinking of the weeks before, the lonely dinners, the endless work, the nights spent staring at the ceiling wondering if anyone could see past her walls, and here was a man, a stranger, with nothing more than a gentle whisper, showing her that perhaps someone could, and she found herself lingering, watching the subtle movements, the way his fingers tapped lightly against the page, the way his eyes lifted to glance at the rain, the cafe, and sometimes at her, as if sensing her thoughts, and she wondered if it was chance that brought him here or something more, some invisible thread pulling them together in the middle of the storm, and she noticed the faint smile playing on his lips when he returned to his writing, as if he hadn't spoken at all, yet the echo of his words remained inside her, pressing lightly against her heart, and Clara felt a rush of curiosity, of longing, of hope, and she realized she wanted to know him, wanted to hear more of the calm certainty in his voice, wanted to understand the world from the perspective of someone who could make it feel lighter with a single phrase, and she imagined asking him questions, sharing her thoughts, revealing pieces of herself she rarely let anyone see, but the courage to speak faltered as the cafe remained quiet, the hum of the heater and the rain providing a soft backdrop, and she found herself thinking that maybe, just maybe, he was waiting for her to return. Or maybe it was all a fleeting moment destined to vanish as soon as she turned away, and yet she stayed, sipping her coffee, her wet hair drying slowly, feeling a strange comfort in the rhythm of the cafe, the rain, and the presence of the man by the window, and she noticed that even when he wasn't speaking, there was something magnetic about him, a sense of calm, of quiet strength, of depth she couldn't yet define, and her thoughts drifted to the future, imagining conversations, laughter, small confessions over shared cups of coffee, walks in the rain and evenings spent talking about everything and nothing, and she realized she had not felt this way in years, not with anyone, the simple feeling of being seen, of being understood, of being drawn to someone not through grand gestures or dramatic encounters, but through the soft, unassuming gentleness of their words and presence, and as the rain began to ease outside, and the cafe's warmth wrapped around her like a blanket, Clara felt a shift inside her, a spark of anticipation, a fragile hope that life could change in ways she hadn't expected, and she glanced at him one last time before leaving, and though he returned to his notebook, she felt the weight of the connection linger, a quiet promise whispered in the simplest phrase, "Take it easy," and she stepped back into the night, the streets glistening with rain, her heart lighter, her mind racing with the possibility that the gentle words of a stranger could open the door to something she had long forgotten, something tender, something real, and as she walked home, she couldn't help but smile, thinking that maybe, just maybe, this encounter was the start of something extraordinary. After that rainy evening, Clara couldn't stop thinking about Adrian, the quiet man in the cafe whose gentle words had lingered in her mind like a soft melody, and over the next few days, she found herself glancing at the clock, imagining if he would appear again, wondering if the connection she had felt was real, or just a fleeting moment shaped by the rain and the warmth of the cafe. And when she finally returned, notebook in hand, she felt a rush of nervous excitement as she scanned the tables and saw him sitting in the same spot by the window, his eyes lifting briefly to meet hers with that small, knowing smile that made her chest tighten, and she chose a seat not far from him, pretending to focus on her writing while stealing glances at him, noticing the careful way he held his pen, the gentle tilt of his head, and the slight curve of his lips. Whenever he read something he had just written, and when he finally looked up and spoke, his voice calm yet carrying a warmth that wrapped around her like a soft blanket, he asked about her day, and the simple question, ordinary as it seemed, made her heart race and her words stumble as she realized she wanted to share everything, to let him see the sides of herself she had hidden for so long. And as they talked, the conversation flowed effortlessly, a dance of words that built trust without demanding it, touching on favorite books, the rhythm of the city streets, childhood memories, dreams too fragile to speak aloud elsewhere. And Clara felt herself opening in ways she hadn't expected, laughing at moments she didn't even remember feeling joy in, feeling the quiet thrill of being understood, of being noticed in ways that mattered. And over time, their visits became a ritual, a comfort she began to depend on, where the cafe, the rain, the warmth of their coffee cups, and the soft hum of their conversations created a world that felt separate from all the burdens she carried outside. A place where the past could fade and the present could be cherished. And Adrian, too, seemed to grow more at ease, sharing glimpses of his life, his hesitations, the mistakes he had made, the dreams he still chased quietly. And Clara listened with an open heart, offering nothing more than her attention and the gentle reassurance of her presence. And yet she realized how much those moments mattered, how rare it was to meet someone who could hold your vulnerability without judgment, who could make silence feel like a conversation, who could make a fleeting glance carry meaning. And one evening, as the sun dipped low and the cafe was bathed in soft amber light, Adrian took her hand, his fingers brushing against hers lightly, and whispered, "You don't always have to carry the world alone." And the words settled over her like a warm embrace, loosening the tension she had held for years, the weight of her worries momentarily lifting. And she looked into his eyes, feeling the sincerity and care in his gaze, and wondered why it was so easy to trust someone she had known for only a few weeks. Yet it felt undeniably right, and in that quiet, sunlit moment, she sensed that a bond was forming, fragile but strong, delicate yet unbreakable in its subtlety. And she realized that love, or perhaps something just as profound, didn't always arrive in grand gestures or dramatic declarations, but in soft words, gentle touches, shared silences, and the courage to show up for someone without expectation. And as they parted that evening, promising to meet again the next day, Clara felt a mixture of excitement and apprehension, the thrill of possibility tangled with the fear of losing what was so new and precious. And she walked home slowly, the streets familiar yet transformed, each step echoing the rhythm of her heartbeat. And she thought about the conversations, the laughter, the quiet moments of understanding, the feeling of being seen, of being valued, and how rare it was to find someone who could make the world feel lighter with nothing more than presence and gentle words. And yet, as she reached her apartment, her phone buzzed with a message from Adrian, asking if she would come to the cafe tomorrow, and she smiled, feeling a surge of warmth and anticipation, realizing that these small connections, these simple shared experiences, were beginning to reshape the way she saw herself in the world, teaching her that patience and openness could lead to something extraordinary. And even as she lay in bed that night, replaying the day's moments in her mind, she couldn't help but wonder what would happen when the layers of their lives, fears, and dreams began to intertwine even more, what secrets or struggles might surface, and how they would navigate the unknown together. But she also felt a quiet confidence that whatever came next, it would be faced with the same gentle care, the same soft patience, and the same unspoken understanding that had drawn them together in the first place. And the thought lingered as sleep finally pulled her under, the memory of his words, his touch, and the quiet connection they were building carrying her into dreams filled with hope, longing, and the tender promise of something real, something lasting. And though the story was just beginning, Clara knew her life had already shifted, subtly but profoundly, by the gentle presence of a man who simply asked her to take it easy. Clara's days had begun to revolve around the small moments she shared with Adrian, yet lately, a subtle unease had begun to settle between them, something she could feel in the pauses of their conversations, in the way his eyes sometimes wandered to the window rather than meeting hers, and though she tried to dismiss it, to tell herself she was imagining things, her heart knew better, sensing the quiet tension in the spaces where laughter and easy words once lived, and it made her anxious in a way she hadn't anticipated, because she didn't want to lose the fragile bond they had built, the gentle connection that had taught her to breathe easier, to trust again, to imagine life with someone who saw her in ways she had never been seen before. Yet Adrian seemed burdened, carrying thoughts he didn't share, and she found herself watching him, noticing the way his hands fidgeted with his pen, the slight crease in his brow, the way he sometimes stared at the rain falling outside as if it contained answers he couldn't speak aloud. And Clara wondered if she should ask, if she should push him to open up, but she remembered the first words he had spoken to her, the soft command to take it easy, and so she stayed silent, waiting, hoping that patience would draw out what he couldn't yet say, even as her mind raced with possibilities, with fears, with imagined scenarios of what his silence could mean. And each day, the small cafe became both sanctuary and battlefield, a place where her emotions danced between hope and uncertainty, and she began to notice how much she had grown to rely on these visits, how much his presence, his calm, his gentle demeanor, had seeped into the corners of her life, and the thought of distance, of losing that, was unbearable, yet unavoidable if his secrets remained locked behind his eyes. And one evening, as the sky darkened and a soft drizzle fell outside, Clara lingered by the window, watching the neon reflections shimmer on wet pavement, feeling the familiar ache of longing mixed with the uncertainty of love. And just as she was about to leave, a figure appeared in the doorway, soaked from the rain, hair plastered to his forehead, coat dripping. Yet his eyes found hers immediately, intense and unguarded, and Adrian approached with an urgency that made her pulse quicken, and before she could speak, he took a deep breath, voice trembling slightly. "Clara, there's something I should have told you sooner." And the weight in his tone made her stomach twist, caught between anticipation and fear, and she felt her hands clench at her sides as he continued, revealing fragments of a past filled with mistakes, heartbreak, and decisions that had left him cautious, wary, unwilling to let anyone close. And she listened, heart pounding, mind racing, absorbing the honesty that poured from him like a river finally freed. And as he spoke, she saw not just vulnerability but courage, a willingness to be seen despite the risk, and it struck her that love, real love, required this kind of bravery, the courage to reveal one's flaws, one's regrets, one's fears. And she felt tears prick her eyes, not from sorrow, but from the raw beauty of witnessing someone she cared for lay their heart bare. And when he paused, looking at her with a mixture of hope and hesitation, she reached out, placing her hand gently over his, grounding him, offering the silent reassurance that she was here, that she would not turn away. And in that moment, the cafe seemed to shrink around them, the rain outside fading to a soft murmur, leaving only the intensity of their connection, the warmth of shared vulnerability, and the fragile yet undeniable thread binding them together. And as they spoke more slowly, carefully, Adrian revealed not just his past but his dreams, the parts of himself he had hidden from the world, and Clara found herself sharing her own fears, her own doubts, the insecurities she had carried for years, and with each revelation, the walls between them crumbled, replaced by trust, empathy, and the quiet thrill of being understood, truly understood by another human being. And the more they talked, the more she realized that love, or something equally profound, was not about perfection, about never faltering, but about showing up, about patience, about small, intentional acts of care that built intimacy over time. And when the cafe finally dimmed its lights to signal closing, they stepped out together into the drizzle, sharing an umbrella, their fingers brushing, their proximity carrying a comfort that neither had known before. And Clara felt a surge of hope, a delicate optimism, as if this night had turned a corner, as if the honesty shared in the quiet rain could heal the lingering doubts, the fears that had shadowed their connection. And she realized that the journey ahead would not be without challenges, that moments of doubt, distance, or misunderstanding might test them, but the foundation they had laid in truth, gentleness, and patience was strong, resilient, and real. And as they walked side by side, the rain softening into mist, Adrian's voice broke the quiet, soft and low. "Thank you for staying." And Clara smiled, feeling the warmth spread through her, a quiet reassurance that they were building something lasting, something rooted not in grand gestures or dramatic declarations, but in shared vulnerability, mutual respect, and the courage to take it slow, to take it easy. And as the city lights glimmered in puddles around them, She realized that love in its gentlest form could change everything, could heal wounds thought permanent, could open hearts long closed, and she allowed herself to believe that what they had was rare, precious, and worth every ounce of hope, fear, and trust she could muster. And in that soft night, beneath the fading rain, they walked forward together, hearts tentative but aligned, knowing that the hardest moments might still come, but also knowing that the bond formed in honesty, gentleness, and understanding could carry them through anything, leaving Clara with a sense of anticipation, longing, and profound gratitude, because she understood that sometimes the right person, the right words, and the right timing could transform life in ways one never expected. And she held on to that realization as they disappeared into the quiet streets, the night holding promise, and the memory of gentle words that had already begun to change everything. The rain had finally stopped, leaving the streets glistening under the soft glow of the city lights, and Clara and Adrian walked side by side, their fingers brushing, carrying the warmth of the cafe and the honesty of the night within them. And as they turned a corner, the sound of distant traffic and the faint hum of life around them seemed to fade, leaving only the quiet intimacy between them, the gentle rhythm of their steps matching the pulse of their hearts. And Clara realized that the hesitations, the doubts, the distance she had felt in recent weeks were now dissolving under the weight of shared truth, the kind of truth that comes only when people risk showing themselves fully. And Adrian stopped for a moment, looking at her with eyes that held both apology and hope, and he spoke, voice low but steady. "Clara, I was afraid to let anyone see me, afraid to be enough, but I can't imagine facing life without you knowing me fully." And her chest tightened at the vulnerability in his words, a tenderness she had longed for but had not dared to expect so openly, and she reached for his hand, intertwining her fingers with his, the touch light yet grounding, and she said softly, "Take it easy, Adrian. We'll figure this out together." Echoing the words that had first drawn her to him, words that had become a silent promise between them, and in that instant, the city seemed to pause, the cool night air carrying the scent of wet streets and possibility, the memory of past fears and heartbreaks slowly giving way to anticipation, trust, and quiet excitement for the future. And as they walked, they talked openly, laughing at small jokes, sharing stories of childhood dreams, and whispering thoughts that had never found their way to anyone else. And with each word, the bond between them deepened, the fragility of earlier uncertainty replaced by a steady warmth that neither had known could feel so strong. And Clara thought about the weeks and months that had led her here, about the lonely evenings, the cautious heartbeats, the yearning for connection, and she understood that this gentle, unassuming presence was what she had been seeking all along, not through dramatic gestures or grand declarations but through quiet moments of honesty, understanding, and patience. And Adrian too seemed transformed, his usual guarded demeanor softening, replaced by a willingness to be present, to share, to accept and give care freely. And they wandered through the empty streets, hands brushing occasionally, sometimes clasped, feeling the warmth of each other's presence. And Clara noticed the small things, the way he tilted his head when listening, the faint curve of his lips in thought, the subtle expression of trust that radiated from him when she offered a comforting word. And it struck her how much intimacy could exist in these small, seemingly insignificant gestures that spoke of love, respect, and tenderness without needing to be named. And as they reached a quiet park, the city lights reflecting off a still pond, Adrian sat on a bench and gestured for her to join, and she did, their shoulders brushing, the silence around them deep but comforting. And they spoke again, this time of fears for the future, of past heartbreaks, of dreams still uncertain. And Clara felt the weight of her own past lighten as she shared, as if honesty alone could dissolve old scars. And Adrian listened without interruption, absorbing each word, nodding, occasionally reaching out to touch her hand, a silent promise of care and presence. And the night carried them through hours of conversation, laughter, and tender reflection. And Clara realized that the love she had been afraid to hope for was not about perfection, not about never faltering or never doubting, but about presence, patience, and the courage to face vulnerability together. And as the first hints of dawn colored the horizon, casting soft pinks and golds across the city, they stood together, hands still intertwined, gazing at the awakening world. And Clara felt a deep, steady calm, a sense that the uncertainty of the past weeks had led to this moment of clarity and connection. And she knew that life would continue to present challenges, that doubts and fears might arise, but the foundation they had built in honesty, gentleness, and mutual care was strong enough to endure. And as Adrian turned to her, Brushing a damp strand of hair from her face, his eyes full of warmth and quiet reverence, he whispered, "Thank you for staying, for believing, for letting me in." And she smiled, feeling a rush of affection and gratitude, because she knew that love, real love, was not a storm but a steady presence, not loud or demanding but enduring, quiet, and life-changing. And in that soft morning light, with the city slowly waking around them, Clara and Adrian made an unspoken promise to continue walking together, step by step, heart by heart, facing life's uncertainties side by side, taking it easy when needed, embracing joy when it came, and nurturing the fragile, beautiful bond they had discovered, a bond born in gentle words, in quiet honesty, and in the courage to open hearts that had once been cautious. And as they finally rose from the bench and walked through the empty streets, their laughter and soft conversation blending with the soft sounds of a city awakening, Clara felt a profound certainty that this was the start of something extraordinary, a love that would grow in patience, tenderness, and understanding, a love that could heal, inspire, and endure. And in her heart, she carried the echo of his first words, the ones that had changed everything. Take it easy. And she knew, in the quiet strength of that phrase and the bond it had nurtured, that life, love, and connection could be gentle, transformative, and everlasting.